1984, The White Book by Makavelli, Episode 15, Part 3 of 4, The Greatest Story Ever Told. We probably in hell already. Our dumb asses not knowing everyone kissing has to go to heaven's not going. Put my soul on it. Thomas and Paul. In the chapter, there are references to the song Juicy. When Thomas says to Paul after Paul confronts him about stealing and robbing, Thomas says, "We ain't have no money. Moms couldn't buy me nothing. We didn't have no heat. The landlord was fussing about the rent. Wasn't no Christmas. Dude, we ate sardines for dinner for a month in this place.
We used to fuss when the landlord dissed us. No heat, wonder why Christmas missed us. Born sinner, the opposite of a winner. Remember when I used to eat sardines for dinner?"
And earlier in the chapter, Gaia was mentioning to her friends that Biggie listens to the radio, that he listens to Mr. Magic Marley Marl, and he had made a mixtape that he wanted E-Main to have, and she gives it to him.
Hanging pictures on my wall. Every Saturday, rap attack Mr. Magic Marley Marl. I let my tape rock till my tape pop.
Paul and Thomas continued. It mentions that Thomas wondered why Paul sanctified the sacrament. Paul mentions it's blessing them to become symbols of Christ. Once we consume them, we will be able to commune with him and feel him. Paul tells him the mainstream story of Christ, aka the greatest story ever told. It was a miracle that Jesus was born to Mary, who supposedly didn't have any sex. The Immaculate Conception. Joseph taught Jesus the craft. The craft, which was mentioned previously in the book. Carpenters were the original masons, I suppose. And Jesus learned the craft from Joseph. Mary and Joseph were Jewish, and the Romans were pagans. Jesus was black, and this should tell you that Mary and Joseph were probably black too. And it would make the Reggie White thing that I referenced in 1983 a lot, or maybe it was 82, a lot more interesting. The greatest story ever told. When Jesus was about 30, he went to Jordan to see John the Baptist to get baptized in the river. When this happened, God said, "Thou art my beloved Son, in thee I am pleased." Then Jesus went into the wilderness, or the desert. Sometimes wilderness, sometimes desert. The words are interchangeable. Muhammad, I think, went into the desert as well. And when he was there, he fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. When the devil thought he was the weakest, he came and tempted him. The devil tried 3 times to trick Jesus and failed. Jesus came out of the desert, a Jedi Knight. The 12 disciples, apostles. And this is from Matthew 10, 2-4, Mark 3, 16 through 19, and Luke 6, 13 to 16. The 12 disciples, also known as the apostles, are Simon, who is also known as Peter, and Simon is also known as Suge Knight. Andrew, this is Simon's brother. James, son of Zebedee. John, James's brother. Philip. Bartholomew, a.k.a. Nathaniel. Thomas, a.k.a. Didymus, a.k.a. Biggie Smalls, the notorious B.I.G. Matthew, the tax collector. James, the son of Alphaeus. Jude, also known as Thaddeus. Labaus, Judas, son of James. Simon the Zealot, Canaanite, the Canaan, Judas Iscariot, that's the famous Judas, Matthias replaced Judas after Judas betrayed Jesus, and then Paul, and Paul is Paul the Apostle, aka Biggie Smalls' father, but also the disciple. Some call Paul the best disciple, or the best apostle. The significance of the number 40 in the Bible. The rains in Noah's day fell for 40 days and 40 nights. Israel ate manna for 40 years. Moses was with God in the mount for 40 days and nights. Moses was again with God 40 days and nights, this time in Exodus 34:28. Moses led Israel from Egypt at age 80, which is 2 times 40, and after 40 years in the wilderness, he died at 120, 3 times 40. This is in Deuteronomy 34:7. The spies searched the land of Canaan for 40 days. Therefore, God made Israel wander for 40 years. 40 stripes was the maximum whipping penalty. God allowed the land to rest for 40 years in Judges 3:11. God again allowed the land to rest for 40 years in Judges 5:31. And God again allowed the land to rest for 40 years in Judges 8:28. Significance of 40 continued. Abdon, who was a judge in Israel, had 40 sons. Israel did evil. God gave them to an enemy for 40 years. Eli judged Israel for 40 years. Goliath presented himself to Israel for 40 days. Saul reigned for 40 years. Ishbosheth was 40 when he began reign. David reigned over Israel for 40 years. The holy place of the temple was 40 cubits long. 40 baths was a measurement and was the size of lavers in temple. The sockets of silver are in groups of 40. Solomon reigned same length as his father, 40 years. Elijah had one meal that gave him strength for 40 days. Ezekiel bore the iniquity of the house of Judah for 40 days. Joash reigned 40 years in Jerusalem, Egypt to be laid desolate for 40 years. Ezekiel's symbolic temple is 40 cubits long. The courts in Ezekiel's temple were 40 cubits long. God gave Nineveh 40 days to repent. Jesus fasted 40 days and nights. Jesus was tempted 40 days. Jesus remained on earth 40 days after resurrection. And women are pregnant for 40 weeks. There's even more references, but I just got tired of it. The reason why I even brought it up was that the chapter Thomas, aka Biggie, asks Paul, why is there 40 this, 40 that? And I think Paul said, look it up. So we did, and that's what we found. And I found that there's even more. It goes on forever. And another reason for the 40 is that there was the folklore that Tupac spent 40 days and 40 nights underground recording all the Makavelli songs. Or maybe it was the All Eyes on Me. I don't know. I always heard that Tupac spent 40 days nonstop recording. The author wanted us to look up 40 days, so there it was. If you got any better 40 days meanings and references, even how it might tie to the 7-day theory, drop it in the comments. But then let's move on. So Thomas asks Paul, why didn't Jesus write any of this down? Or at least tell somebody? And Paul says, he did tell some people, and they were called the Essenes. And Thomas asks, well, what did he tell them? And he said that they didn't need a church to speak to God. Who are the Essenes? I called all my friends that have Bible knowledge. I was so fascinated with who are these Essenes? And I couldn't get any good answers. I wanted to give them first crack at it before I hit the internet. But nobody provided me anything good, so to the internet I went and found Olivier Monitara, who's written a lot of books with fascinating titles. So this is the information I'm assuming from him. The Essenes were the civilization that possessed the Dead Sea Scrolls. It is not believed that they wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. It is said that almost all of the principal founders of what would later be called Christianity were Essenes. St. Anne, Joseph and Mary, John the Baptist, Jesus, John the Evangelist, etc. And that would make sense if Jesus came back and spoke to them. The Essenes considered themselves to be a separate people, not because of external signs like skin color, hair color, etc., but because of the illumination of their inner life and their knowledge of the hidden mysteries of nature unknown to other men. They considered themselves to be also a group of people at the center of all peoples, because everyone could become part of it as soon as they had successfully passed the selective tests. Wow, what is this? Sounds like a secret society to me. And I'm assuming they believe you could get the God powers. See, most religions teach you to be a slave, to be subservient, that you can never be good, you can never be as good as God, you're a sinner, and you suck. And you need to beg God for forgiveness to get back into his kingdom. And so these Essenes give you rites of passage and then give you their hidden knowledge of the mysteries of nature unknown to other men. I'm just guessing here. I don't know. But I know that everything I learned from secret societies is they have like the opposite spin on things. Instead of it being, like for instance, instead of Jesus being a God that became a man, if you believe that Jesus was a man that became a God, that also means that you too could get that power. And it seems that that's what the Essenes are saying. And if the Essenes are saying that, and Jesus said that to the Essenes, what can we assume? And why are all these hidden texts forbidden for man to read? And let's keep in mind that Paul said to Thomas that Joseph taught Jesus the craft. So the Essenes continued. The Essenes thought, and rightfully so, that they were the heirs of God's sons and daughters of old, the heirs to their great ancient civilization. They possessed their advanced knowledge and worked assiduously in secret for the triumph of the light over the darkness of the human mind. They felt that they had been entrusted with a mission which would turn out to be the founding of Christianity and of Western civilization. They were supported in this effort by highly evolved beings who directed the brotherhood. They were true saints, masters of wisdom, hierophants of the ancient arts of mastery. The heirs of God's sons and daughters of old. I don't know if you've heard the story of the Anunnaki as told by Zecharia Sitchin. It's his interpretation of the ancient Sumerian stone tablets, but that there were like 1% of when the Anunnaki left. The Anunnaki were beings from the planet Nibiru, and that before they left, because the humans had outnumbered mankind, and like in Genesis it says, be fruitful and multiply, and that humans were like a slave race that were here to mine for gold to give to the gods, and the gods were aliens or Anunnaki from Nibiru. But when they outnumbered the Anunnaki, they trained 1% of the people in the sacred wisdom and sacred knowledge, and maybe that was the Essenes. The Essenes continued. They were not limited to a single religion, but studied all of them in order to extract the great scientific principles. They considered each religion to be a different stage of a single revelation. They accorded great importance to the teachings of the ancient Chaldeans, of Zoroaster, of Hermes Trismegisti, to the secret instructions of Moses, and of one of the founding masters of their order who had transmitted techniques similar to those of Buddhism, as well as to the revelation of Enoch. They possessed the living science of all of these revelations. Thus, they knew how to communicate with angelic beings, aliens, and had solved the question of the origin of evil on the earth. And if you recall Tupac on the last interview, when he was mentioning KRS-One and all the rappers, he said, I've mastered their style. I've mastered their style. All these rappers out there, they may have a hit record, but then I listen to them and I mastered their style. And that sounds like what the Essenes did. They mastered all of the religions. And Tupac would say, I didn't just listen to my rap songs or just one group, West Coast, East Coast. I listen to it all, and then I master all those styles. So when you have me, I'm like the 36 chambers. It's all of those styles, all mixed into one, and I have all their knowledge. Something like that. I'm kind of paraphrasing him, but if you never heard the last interview, CD, you absolutely have to. With these scenes, I'm like, what has the author Makavelli revealed to us? This is something else. The Essenes continued. One of their major preoccupations was to protect themselves from any contact with evil spirits in order to preserve the purity of their souls. They knew that they would only be on earth for a short time, and they did not want to prostitute their eternal souls. It was this attitude, this strict discipline, this absolute refusal to lie or compromise that made them the object of so much persecution through the ages. They couldn't be bought out. They really kept it real. The Essenes considered themselves the guardians of the divine teaching. They had in their possession a great number of very ancient manuscripts, some of them going back to the dawn of time. A large portion of the school members spent their time decoding them, translating them into several languages, and reproducing them in order to perpetuate and preserve this advanced knowledge. They considered this work to be a sacred task. It kind of reminds me of those guys at the beginning of Indiana Jones 3 that were protecting the secrets, and they had the tattoos on them. The Essenes continued. The Essenes considered their brotherhood-sisterhood as the presence on earth of the teaching of the sons and daughters of God. They were the light which shines in the darkness and which invites the darkness to change itself into light. Thus, for them, when a candidate asked to be admitted to their school, it meant that, within him, a whole process of awakening of the soul was set in motion. Such a soul was ready to climb the stairs of the sacred temple of humanity. The Essenes differentiated between the souls which were sleeping, drowsy, and awakened, the sheeple. Their task was to help, to comfort, and to relieve the sleeping souls, to try to awaken the drowsy souls, and to welcome and guide the awakened souls. Only the souls considered as awakened could be initiated into the mysteries of the brotherhood-sisterhood. Then began for them a path of evolution that could not stop anymore through the cycle of their incarnations. The Essenes, everybody knew the brothers and sisters in white. The Hebrews called them the school of prophets, and to the Egyptians, they were the healers, the doctors. They had property in nearly all of the big cities, and in Jerusalem there was even a door that bore their name, the door of the Essenes. Despite some fear and joking due to the rejection of that which one does not know, the people as a whole felt respect and esteem for the Essenes because of their honesty, their pacifism, their goodness, their discretion, and their talent as healers, devoted to the poorest as well as to the richest. They knew that the greatest Hebrew prophets came from their lineage and their school. Moreover, even if the Brotherhood was very strict about the law of secrecy with regard to its internal doctrine, it cultivated many points of contact with the people, notably through places of lodging for the pilgrims from every horizon, through helpful actions in difficult periods, and especially through the healing of illnesses. These were places of primary teaching and of healing were located in precise areas where people could go freely. Jesus' popularity. Jesus said the good words to the poor folks and the criminal types, somewhat like thug life. Tupac said something to the effect of, as long as there are poor people, I will have a product to sell and an audience to sell to, or something to that effect. Follow me! Hail Mary. I'm guessing Follow Me was in the chapter and is obviously a tip to Hail Mary from the Makavelli album. When Jesus was 33, him and the disciples go to Jerusalem for Passover. I don't know if this is a reference to Tupac going to the Mike Tyson-Bruce Seldon fight in Las Vegas. Don't know. The Romans and the Jewish priests don't like Jesus. The media crucifying Tupac. Thomas asked why people don't like Jesus. Paul simply said to seek. Seek out the answers. Why don't they like Jesus? And that's a question for the audience. Thomas asked, why don't people like Jesus? Paul told us to seek it out. What's your answer? They get Judas to turn on Jesus for 40 pieces of silver. Reminded me of Master P saying, your best friend might be your enemy. But if they could get Judas to turn on Jesus for 40 pieces of silver, we could know for sure that Judas was not an Essene. Pontius Pilate gave people a chance to set Jesus free, and they didn't. Which was always my problem when I was in preschool. I went to an Episcopalian preschool, and I used to see Jesus all hanging, and I used to say, well, if this guy is so great, how come nobody saved him? Nobody did anything. Why'd they let that happen to him? And I was like, because I know if I was there, I would have helped the guy. If this guy was the Son of God and if he was that important, I would have helped him out. And I probably would have been one of the guys hanging on those other crosses. But everybody else just stood by and watched it happen. And I guess that's why everybody begs for forgiveness. If it was me, I'd have stuck up for him. and they probably would have hung me too. You know, I always hear it blamed on Pontius Pilate that he washed his hands free, but never do I hear the people get blamed for letting it happen. And that's what's happened for millennium. People allow evil to get away with things, and you do nothing. The sheeple. You want to blame Pontius Pilate. Blame yourselves. The people allowed this to happen. Not Pontius Pilate. The people did. Lord, forgive us, for we know not what we do. But, you know, the spirit of Tupac's always been within me. When he said, I don't want to be 50 years old at a BET We Shall Overcome conference, I was feeling that. And that's what I'm saying. And just like the Essenes said, and just like William Cooper said, wake up. Crucifixion. Jesus was flogged and beaten bad, and then they made him carry the cross to where he would be crucified. They crucify him and leave him out there to die. An earthquake happened. The following Sunday, Mary went to his tomb, and his body wasn't there. Run quick, see, what do we have here now? And Tupac spent 7 days in the hospital, supposedly. He was resurrected and was brought back from the dead for 40 days. And it looks like we already covered this, but Thomas asked, why is it always 40 this and 40 that? And the answer he gets from Paul was seek. So seek out the truth. Everything we talk about, everything you read in that book, we're all told by Makavelli to seek out what it means. And that's what I've kind of been trying to do with this 4-part 1984 series, was to show people how to seek out the information. A quick Google search about the 40 this and 40 that reveals testing. And as I had mentioned earlier, I had heard that Tupac recorded for 40 days and 40 nights. And from the album cover of Makavelli, Don Illuminati, it's obvious that he's being compared to the Black Jesus being crucified. And what's funny is, at the time when that Makavelli album cover came out, it was so controversial. If something like that came out now, it would just be yawned. It'd be like, oh yeah, what do you know? Another sensationalized album cover. Everybody's copied Tupac. Remixes to the Bible. And I learned that phrase, remixes to the Bible, from Trick Daddy on Thug Holiday. I learned all your remixes to the Bible. So there's 46 books of Christian Old Testament, 27 books of the New Testament, the King James Version, Good News Bible, which removes the thous and the these and puts it into modern words and removes all of the hidden codes. The thous and the these are part of the code with the 40/40s, ages of the children, etc. Potential numerology. It mentions doublespeak. We will get into that, into 1984 by Orwell later in the chapter. Well, that happened in part 1. The Word. Who translated it? Who put their own twists on it? Thomas thought, they could have done that with all of them, meaning all of these Bibles could be remixed. And that's what Reggie White thought as well. And that's why Reggie White learned how to read Hebrew and went to Israel and read the original texts and found his own truth. He seeked. He did what Paul said to do. Whether or not it's the absolute truth that Reggie White found or not, it's irrelevant because it was his truth. And I really respect Reggie White for doing all that. He really wanted to know. King James, and these are the thoughts of Paul in the book. So King James's wife, Anne, was a high witch. He wrote a book called Demonology and was homosexual. And Paul does not endorse the King James remix. And I realize now I didn't do any research on Anne of Denmark. So if you want to look up Anne of Denmark and finding out where it says that she was a high witch, that'd be interesting to know in the comments. Maybe post some links or info. And just quickly touching on Thomas questioning the authenticity of any of the remixes, any of the versions of the Bible. Since they're all translated, how do we know any of it could be real? And same with, like, anytime you see people that speak another language on television and you see the subtitles that's transcribed into English, I've always wondered, if those were true translations, especially like the Osama bin Laden videotapes. Historians say I remember in college, I learned that Socrates did not leave any writings of his own, nor did Jesus, and that Socrates could have just been an invention of Plato's mind. And Jesus, I don't know. So the historians say that Jesus was born in a cave, okay, and that Mary was not a virgin, and that Jesus survived the cross and married Mary Magdalene and had children and a bloodline. If you want to know more about that, see the Da Vinci Code. He went to a far land and started a revolution. It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine. The Gnostics, Book of Jubilees, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Do the work and verify the facts for yourself. Question everything. These are the things that society teaches you not to do. They do not want you to question. They do not want you to investigate on your own. They only want you to take what either the news, the church, or your societal circle tells you to believe. But be that maverick. Be that Tupac. And think for yourself. Find your own truth. Don't feel obligated to adopt society's version of reality, because you'll never live up to it and you'll never be able to win at society's game. Create your own moral code. Thomas's laziness. He said, it's too much to think about at once. Why didn't Jesus write it himself? He left no writings of his own. The Essenes are the people Jesus told his wisdom to. And Jesus told the Essenes that you didn't need a church to speak to God. Which I think we covered already, but Thomas's laziness seems to be an important character trait that may play out in future chapters. But also for people in general, I've taught a lot of people, mentored many, and laziness is abundant in people. They wanted spoon-fed, and I'll spoon-fed. I don't have no problem spoon-feeding, but at some point, and I learned this from playing baseball and other sports, you got to step in that batter's box on your own and face the pitcher. And it's just you, and you can't rely on your group. You can't rely on others. You have to rely on your own skill, and you have to swing that bat. The way we're conditioned is to just work and then go home and watch TV or play video games. You have to have that fire within to keep fighting every second of the day, fighting for more knowledge, fighting to advance yourself farther so you don't stay in the same exact circle. They invent excuses for you to use on why you can't succeed, and you have to fight those too. You think Tupac went home and watched TV? Heck no, man. He knew his time was limited, and your time is limited. All of our time is limited because we're all going to die, unless you can find the Holy Grail or some elixir to keep you alive forever. But barring finding that, you are on a time limit, and you have to achieve. Don't waste your precious time. Your time is already stolen from you. That spare time, no matter how tired you are, find a way, find that strength, find that pride. Some of my pupils have risen up, and others, they just quit. I could only lead the horses to water. They have to drink it. And some of them, not only do they not want to drink it, they want me to drink it for them and magically quench their thirst. But as Paul said in this chapter, you have to do the work. Seek the answers, but know that the answers are not written in books. And I could quote CeeLo again, this time in Distant Wilderness. He said, every book you read is still limited education. You'll have to learn how to speak to God personally, and time is short. As you know, my conspiracy is that there's a conspiracy over time. They take your time from you. They want you to be ignorant. They don't want you to know. And this is the same thing as it was 500 years ago. They didn't teach people to read. They didn't want you to interpret the Bible for yourself. They didn't want you to have your own thoughts, and they sure did not want you to have spare time. Spare time is what creates the revolution. Fight. Seek. Ask questions. Stop being lazy. Stop being lazy. Stop being lazy. They want you to be lazy. Don't give them what they want. Anyway, our song of the week is Only God Can Judge Me. This is like a remake of Tupac's classic Only God Can Judge Me from the All Eyes on Me soundtrack. And this is just a snippet. It was recorded in 2002 by J-Li. If you have a song of the week, make sure you get at me on Facebook. The full version of the song can be downloaded in the link below.
Only God could judge me. I hear the doctor standing over me, screaming I can make it. Got a body full of bullet holes, laying here naked. Still I can't breathe, something's evil in my IV. Cause every time I breathe, I think they're killing me. I'm having nightmares, homicidal fantasies. I wake up strangling, tangled in my bed sheets. I call the nurse cause it hurts to reminisce. How did it come to this? I wish they didn't miss. Somebody help me, tell me where to go from here. Cause even though it's crowded, through the Lord care. I try to remember but it hurts. So I'm walking through the cemetery talking to the dirt. I'd rather die like a man than live like a coward. There's a ghetto up in heaven and it's ours. Black power is what we scream as we dream in a paranoid state. And our fate is a lifetime of hate. Dear mama, can you save me? And fuck peace cause the streets gotta pave us. We gotta eat, no more hesitation. Each and every black male strapped. And they wonder why we suicidal, run around strapped. Mr. Police, please try to see that it's a million motherfuckers dressing just like you. Only God can judge.
Alright, yeah, that was J-Li, Only God Could Judge Me, cover of Tupac. I'll see you in part 4. I can't believe we've already crossed the 30-minute mark for this video. I thought it would be about 12 minutes, and here we are at 30 minutes. Expect part 4 to be lengthy, just like part 1 and part 3. There's just so much to cover, and as Paul and Makavelli, the author, said, seek, do the work. So we're trying to do some work here. Happy 44th birthday to Tupac. I didn't realize that Tech Nine was also born in 1971, even though he mentions it like once per album. So Tech Nine will be 44 this year, and happy 44th birthday to Tupac, wherever you are. We all made sure to picture you rolling, and we know that you're not hard to find. For the AIDS chapter, I failed to discuss more of Frankie Goes to Hollywood. His music videos are pretty controversial for the time period and quite interesting, so you might want to check those out from a historical perspective. I will try to make the videos a manageable length in the future. I can't guarantee it, but 1984 was the opportunity to discuss many topics that needed to be established at the halfway point of this book. So at this point, I've only read up to 1984, so I can't predict where the material will lead us, but 1984 is a special year for me only because of George Orwell's book. And I think that is one of the most important books to read. Of course, that is besides the White Book by Makavelli. If you have anything you want mentioned in the future videos, make sure you hit me up on Facebook. If you're an artist that is a fan of the White Book and a fan of Tupac, if you have material you want shared with everybody, send that over to me. Here's a question for the audience. Does anybody who is still watching this series up to this point not think Tupac is alive? And I'd also like to point out that as the Essenes taught that we should look at all of the religions and all information to become masters, this book, the White Book, also exemplifies that in that it's not just a book about Tupac. It's not even just a book about Biggie and Nas and Jay-Z or rap beef. It's about everything. It's about all conspiracies. Conspiracy theorists, good ones, look at all angles, all information. There's many conspiracy theorists that are like one-sided and they have an agenda, a hidden agenda, and then they push that agenda. And there's many different sides in conspiracy. But the true conspiracy theorist, or really the true thinker, the true open mind, considers everything, trusts nothing, follows no one, but listens to all. And there's a book called The Road Less Traveled. I never read it. One of my good friends recommended it to me when I was in college. And I said, well, what's it about? And he said it was about having multiple reality roadmaps, to not just have one roadmap. Because life is complex, why limit your thoughts? Why limit your understandings? Have many roadmaps to reality. And that is the road less traveled. The road commonly traveled is having reality spoon-fed to you. A quick look up on Wikipedia for the road less traveled shows 4 basic disciplines. The first one is delaying gratification, sacrificing present comfort for future gains. And that piece of knowledge is totally ignored in present-day society because present-day society is Keynesianism, and it's almost like drug users. Don't tell me about tomorrow. It's all about today. Push it to the limit. Second one is acceptance of responsibility. Accepting responsibility for one's own decisions. In the future, I will have my verse from Institutionalized Part 2, and I directly quote that line in it, and I never even saw this until today. My line goes, responsibility for one's actions never gets promoted by my peers. So responsibility for one's own decisions, that's the road less traveled. Dedication to truth is the third discipline. Honesty, both in word and deed. I often quote JT Money of Poison Clan. He said, don't speak about it, be about it. Because I'm the kind of guy that'll come around and see about it. The fourth discipline is balancing, handling conflicting requirements. Scott Peck, who's the author, talks of an important skill to prioritize between different requirements, bracketing. So write it down. Have a plan. Forecast your future. Have a destination and build the road to get there. The road less traveled. So discipline. And there's more to the road less traveled. You could look it up on Wikipedia. There's tons of stuff on it. That's just a quick synopsis of it. It profoundly influenced one of my best friends, and he's one of the best thinkers I know. He passed it on to me. I never read it, but I just passed it down to you. There's only so much time in my day. I can't read everything. And sometimes when those tell me to seek, I'm like, come on, man. I deserve a little bit of spoon feeding here. Come on, man. But anyway, I'll see you all in part 4. Future chapters won't be as long, but that's a lie if I say that, because I don't know for sure. May the force be with you.